Marcus Chen sat in the darkest corner of the Crossroads Station Commons, staring at the packet in his hands. The ramen was 3 months old, vacuum-sealed, and worth more to him than the broken-down cargo hauler sitting in Bay 17. It was the last piece of Earth he had left. His ship's engine had died 2 weeks ago. The repair costs were astronomical, far beyond what his last 3 jobs had paid. He'd sold everything he could, his spare clothes, his datapad, even his father's old watch. The ramen was supposed to be for emergencies only. Well, this was an emergency. After he ate this, there would be nothing left until he figured out how to earn enough credits for both repairs and food. The commons area was busy today. Traders from a dozen species moved between tables, conducting business in a mixture of languages. Marcus recognized most of them by now. The insectoid Vryn with their clicking speech, the massive Thorum who had to duck through doorways, the sleek Davari with their blue skin and 3 eyes. They all had somewhere to go, something to do. He was the only one stuck here, slowly going broke. Then he saw her. She sat 3 tables away, alone. A Valorian, unmistakable with her tall frame and the iridescent scales that covered her neck and forearms. Her armor was beautiful, dark metal, etched with silver patterns that marked high rank in the Imperium. But something was wrong. Her shoulders were slumped, her head bowed. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Marcus had seen Valorians before. They were hard to miss. The Imperium was one of the most powerful military forces in this sector. They conquered worlds, expanded their territory, and looked down on most other species as inferior. Humans especially. Too soft, they said. Too emotional. Too weak. This Valorian didn't look powerful right now. She looked broken. Marcus watched as she approached the food dispensers along the wall. She placed her hand on the credit scanner. The machine beeped. A harsh, negative sound. Declined. She tried again. Same result. Her hand fell to her side. Around the commons, other Valorians sat at their own tables. Marcus counted 6 of them, all in merchant clothes rather than military armor. They were watching the woman. One of them met her gaze and deliberately turned away. Another laughed quietly to his companion. The woman's scales seemed to lose some of their shine. Marcus heard fragments of conversation from nearby tables. His translator implant caught words in Valorian that made him frown. Disgraced, exile, refused orders. The other Valorians weren't just ignoring her. They were shunning her. In their culture, that was as good as a death sentence. The woman returned to her table and sat down heavily. She stared at the surface with empty eyes. Her hands were shaking slightly. Marcus looked down at his ramen packet. His stomach growled. He'd been rationing protein bars for days, saving this for when things got truly desperate. After this, he'd be hungry for at least 3 or 4 days until he could find work, any work. He looked at the woman again. She had pressed one hand against her midsection, probably trying to quiet the same hunger he felt. Marcus's grandmother had a saying. She'd told him the story many times, how she'd fled from a war zone with nothing, how strangers had given her food when she was starving, how that kindness had saved her life. When you have enough to share, she'd said, you share. That's what makes us human. He had enough for 1 meal. That was something. Before he could talk himself out of it, Marcus stood up. He walked across the commons, his boots echoing on the metal floor. Conversations quieted as aliens noticed him approaching the Valorian woman. She didn't look up until he reached her table. Marcus set the ramen packet down in front of her. You look like you need this more than I do. The woman stared at the packet. Then her eyes, a deep gold color, lifted to his face. She blinked slowly, as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. I cannot accept, she said in heavily accented Standard. Her voice was rough, like she hadn't spoken in days. "Why not?" Marcus asked. He pulled out the chair across from her and sat down, ignoring the stares from around the room. "You are human. I am Valorian. We are not." She paused, searching for words. "We are not friends." Marcus shrugged. "Maybe not. But you're hungry, and I have food. Doesn't seem complicated to me." The woman looked at the ramen again. Her hand moved toward it, then pulled back. "This is your last meal. I can see it in your eyes. In my culture, to give one's last meal is to offer one's life essence. The debt would be—" She stopped, shaking her head. "I have nothing to repay you with. Nothing." "I'm not asking for payment," Marcus said. "I'm just sharing food. Where I come from, that's what you do when someone's hungry." The commons had gone almost completely silent now. Even the Vryn had stopped their clicking. Marcus could feel dozens of eyes on them. The woman's hands were trembling harder now. She looked at Marcus, really looked at him, as if trying to understand a puzzle that made no sense. Finally, slowly, she picked up the packet. "What is your name, human?" "Marcus Chen." "I am Sileth Vascorum." She paused. "I was commander of the 7th Fleet, before my disgrace." Marcus noticed she used the past tense. "What happened?" Sileth's fingers tightened on the ramen packet. "I refused an order to destroy a colony world. There were refugees there. Families. Children. Some were human. My superiors said they were harboring enemies of the Imperium. I said they were harboring people who needed help." Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. "I was wrong to refuse. In Valorian law, orders must be followed. Always." "Sounds like you were right to me," Marcus said quietly. Sileth looked up sharply. For a moment, something flickered in her eyes. Hope, maybe, or disbelief. Then it faded. "Your people have strange ideas about right and wrong." "Maybe," Marcus agreed, "but we're pretty firm on the whole not killing kids thing." Sileth was quiet for a long moment. Then she carefully opened the ramen packet. The smell of spices and dried noodles filled the air. She looked down at it with an expression Marcus couldn't quite read. "In Valorian culture," she said softly, "there is a saying, 'The last meal shared is the first bond forged.' I did not think I would ever be on the receiving end of such a gift. Especially not from a human." She began to eat slowly, carefully, as if the ramen was the most precious thing in the universe. Marcus watched her, his own stomach growling in protest at what he'd just done. But he didn't regret it. He thought about his grandmother, about strangers who'd shared their food with her when she had nothing. This was right. He knew it in his bones. When Sileth finished, she set the empty packet down and placed her hand over her heart. A gesture Marcus didn't recognize. She spoke words in Valorian, her voice formal and steady. His translator implant rendered them as, "I swear on my honor, on my blood, on my name. This debt will be repaid." "You don't have to," Marcus started. The station's alarms cut him off, loud, blaring, impossible to ignore. Everyone in the commons looked up as the announcement system crackled to life. "Valorian Imperium warship approaching. All vessels maintain current positions." "This is not a drill." Sileth stood slowly, her face going pale beneath her scales. "They have come for me," she said quietly. "The High Command does not leave the disgrace to wander. They will bring me home for final judgment." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. What does that mean? Final judgment? Sileth met his eyes. "It means death, Marcus Chen, but you have given me something I thought I had lost." She straightened, pulling her shoulders back, standing tall despite her exhaustion. "You reminded me what honor truly means. Now I will show the Imperium the same." The commons' doors opened. 6 Valorian soldiers in full armor marched inside, weapons at their sides. They moved directly towards Sileth's table. Marcus stood up, not sure what he could do, but knowing he couldn't just sit there. "Commander Sileth Vascorum, You are summoned before the High Command for final judgment on charges of treason and dereliction of duty. Scylla nodded once. Then she turned to Marcus. I invoke my right to bring a witness. This human will accompany me. The soldier looked at Marcus with barely concealed disgust. A human? Commander, this is... My right, Scylla interrupted firmly. Under Valorian law, I may bring one witness to my final judgment. I choose Marcus Chen. The soldier's jaw tightened, but he nodded. As you wish, Commander. As the soldiers formed up around them, Scylla leaned close to Marcus and whispered, Forgive me for pulling you into this, but you gave me hope when I had none. Now I need you to help me give that hope to others. Will you stand with me before the High Command? Marcus thought about his broken ship, his empty stomach, his uncertain future. When you have enough to share, you share. He had enough courage for this. Yeah, he said. I'll stand with you. The Valorian warship was called the Relentless. Marcus thought the name fit perfectly as he walked through its corridors, flanked by armed soldiers who looked at him like he was something they'd scraped off their boots. The ship was massive, easily 10 times the size of any vessel he'd ever been on. Everything was metal at sharp angles, designed for efficiency and intimidation. Scylla walked ahead of him, her spine straight, despite the energy restraints around her wrists. She hadn't said anything since they'd left the station. Marcus wanted to ask her what to expect, what he should say, but the soldiers made it clear that talking was not allowed. They passed groups of Valorian crew members who stopped to stare. Marcus heard whispers, felt the weight of their contempt. To them he was vermin. Humans were weak, short-lived creatures who built civilizations on diplomacy instead of strength. The Imperium had tried to conquer Earth twice. Both times, humanity had survived through alliances and cunning rather than military might. The Valorians respected neither. The tribunal chamber was enormous. High ceilings arched overhead, and the walls were decorated with battle standards from 100 conquered worlds. At the far end, 3 figures sat on raised platforms, the high judges. They wore ceremonial armor that gleamed under harsh lights. Below them, 50 Valorian commanders filled bench seating, creating an amphitheater of hostile eyes. Marcus's heart hammered in his chest. This was insane. He was a cargo hauler, not a diplomat. What was he supposed to do here? The soldiers brought them to the center of the chamber and forced them to kneel. Marcus's knees hit the metal floor hard enough to hurt. Scylla knelt beside him, her head bowed. One of the high judges stood. She was old, her scales faded to silver, but her voice was strong. Scylla Vaz Coram, formerly commander of the 7th Fleet. You stand accused of treason, dereliction of duty, and refusal of lawful orders. Each charge carries the sentence of death. How do you answer? Scylla raised her head. I do not deny the charges, High Judge. A murmur ran through the assembled commanders. Marcus risked a glance at Scylla. She looked calm, almost peaceful. The High Judge nodded slowly. You refused a direct order to eliminate a colony harboring enemies of the Imperium. You allowed those enemies to escape. Your actions cost the Imperium strategic advantage in that sector. Do you have anything to say in your defense? I do, High Judge. Scylla's voice rang clear through the chamber. But first, I ask that my witness be allowed to speak. The second High Judge, a massive male with scales like black glass, leaned forward. You brought a human as your witness? This is your defense, to show us how far you have fallen? I brought him to show you how far the Imperium has fallen. Shocked silence. Then angry voices erupted from the assembled commanders. The third High Judge, a female with red scales, slammed her fist on her platform. Silence! The chamber quieted. The red-scaled judge glared at Scylla. You dare insult this tribunal? You dare insult the Imperium itself? I dare to tell the truth, Scylla said calmly. And the truth began on Crossroads Station, when this human, gave me his last meal. Marcus felt every eye in the room turn to him. He wanted to disappear. The silver-scaled High Judge tilted her head. Explain. Syleth looked at Marcus. Her eyes asked a question. He gave a tiny nod. If he was going to die here, he might as well go out telling the truth. This human had nothing, Syleth said. His ship was broken. He had no money, no food except one packet of his people's rations. He should have eaten it himself. Instead, he gave it to me, a Valorian, a member of the species that has tried to conquer his homeworld. He gave me his last meal and asked for nothing in return. The actions of one foolish human prove nothing, the black-scaled judge growled. They prove everything. Syleth's voice rose with passion. I have spent my life serving the Imperium. I have conquered 17 worlds. I have commanded fleets, led soldiers, brought glory to our people. And in all that time, with all that power, I never once showed the honor that this weak human showed in a single moment. The silver-scaled judge leaned back. You wish the human to testify about this meal? Very well. Humans, stand and speak. Marcus stood on shaky legs. His voice came out rough. I don't know what you want me to say. Tell us why you gave your food to a Valorian, the judge commanded. Marcus swallowed hard. Because she was hungry. It's not complicated. You asked for nothing in return? No. Why not? In Valorian culture, every gift demands repayment. You knew this? Marcus shook his head. I didn't know that. Where I come from, when someone's hungry, you feed them. That's just what you do. The red-scaled judge laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. How naive, how wonderfully primitive. This is the weakness we see in all humans. You give without thought of gain. You share without demanding tribute. This is why your species will never be great. Something in Marcus snapped. Maybe it was fear, maybe it was exhaustion, but suddenly he was angry. My grandmother was a refugee, he said loudly. She fled a war with nothing but the clothes on her back. Strangers gave her food. They gave her shelter. They asked for nothing. Those strangers saved her life, and because of them, I exist. You call that weakness? I call it strength. Real strength. The kind that builds instead of destroys. The chamber erupted in angry shouts. Marcus stood there, his fists clenched, knowing he'd probably just signed his death warrant. Silence! The silver-scaled judge's voice cut through the noise like a blade. She looked at Marcus with something that might have been interest. You believe sharing food is strength? Yes, Marcus said firmly. Because it's easy to take things from people. It's easy to conquer and destroy. What's hard is giving something away when you need it yourself. What's hard is showing mercy when you have the power to be cruel. That's real strength. Syleth stood beside him. This is what I learned on that station, judges. This human, who we have been taught to see as inferior, showed more honor in one gesture than I have seen in 1,000 military campaigns. And I realized we have lost our way. The black-scaled judge slammed his fist down. You committed treason, Commander. You let enemies escape. I let children live, Syleth shot back. I let families stay together. I chose mercy over massacre. If that is treason, then I am guilty. But I stand here and tell you that the Imperium is wrong. We measure strength by what we can take, what we can destroy. We have forgotten that true strength is measured by what we choose to give, what we choose to preserve. The red-scaled judge pointed at Marcus. And you base this revelation on the actions of one human? One meal? Yes, Syleth said simply, because that one meal taught me more about honor than all my years of service. It showed me that we have been worshipping the wrong gods. The silver-scaled judge was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, These are serious accusations, Commander. You claim the Imperium itself has lost its honor. This cannot be ignored or dismissed. Then, I invoke Kel-Shara. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Commanders leaped to their feet, shouting. The high judges themselves looked shocked. Marcus had no idea what Kel-Shara meant, but clearly it was significant. The silver-scaled judge raised her hand for silence. It took several minutes before the chamber quieted. You invoke the ancient right? You challenge the honor of the Imperium itself? I do, Syleth said firmly. Explain this to the human, the judge commanded. He deserves to know what you have done. Syleth turned to Marcus. Kel-Shara is an old law, rarely invoked. It allows any Valorian to challenge the Imperium's honor if they believe we have strayed from our founding principles. If I am right, the Imperium must change. If I am wrong, I die, and my family name is erased from history. Marcus felt cold. And me? You are my witness and my proof. If I am wrong, you die with me. You could have mentioned that before, Marcus muttered. Syleth almost smiled. Would you have come if I had? Marcus thought about it. Probably not. Then I am glad I did not mention it. The silver-scaled judge spoke again. Under the laws of Kel-Shara, you must prove your claim. You say this human showed greater honor than our commanders. You say his way is stronger than ours. Prove it. How? Syleth asked. The three high judges conferred quietly. Then the black-scaled judge spoke. Outpost Karaz, on the third moon of Valdris. A company of our soldiers is trapped there, surrounded by the native predators. They have food and ammunition for months, but they have called for evacuation. They say the predators are too numerous, too dangerous. Our warriors are ready to retreat. The red-scaled judge continued the thought. If he can succeed where our soldiers are ready to fail, we will consider your claim. If he fails, you both die, and Kel-Shara is answered. Marcus felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. Wait, what? I'm not a soldier. I'm a cargo hauler. Exactly, the silver-scaled judge said. You are a weak human with no military training. If you can accomplish what our warriors cannot, then perhaps Syleth is right. Perhaps we'd have forgotten something important. She looked at Syleth. Do you accept these terms? Syleth looked at Marcus. In her eyes, he saw an apology and a question, and a desperate hope, all mixed together. Marcus thought about his grandmother, about strangers who shared food, about being the kind of person who gave instead of took, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. He took a deep breath. Okay, I'll do it. The silver-scaled judge nodded slowly. Then Kel-Shara is invoked. Succeed, and the Imperium will hear your challenge. Fail, and you will be executed. May the ancestors judge you fairly. As the guards led them out of the chamber, Syleth whispered to Marcus, Thank you. I know I have asked too much of you. Marcus laughed, a slightly hysterical sound. Yeah, you really have, but I'm already in it now. Might as well see it through. You are very brave for a human. I'm very stupid for anyone, Marcus corrected. Then more seriously, what are we actually walking into out there? Syleth's expression darkened. 80 of our finest soldiers, trapped by creatures they fear to fight. If you can find a way to save them when they could not save themselves. She paused. The Imperium would have to listen. And if I can't? Then we die knowing we tried to change things. That is more than most can say. Marcus nodded slowly. It wasn't comforting, but it was honest. And right now, honesty was all they had. The transport ship that took them to Outpost Karaz was small and cold. Marcus sat in the cargo hold with Syleth, both of them strapped into uncomfortable seats, while two guards watched from across the compartment. The trip would take 2 days. Marcus spent most of the first day trying not to think about what waited for them. On the second day, Syleth finally spoke. Tell me about your grandmother. Marcus looked at her, surprised. Why? Because you mentioned her in the tribunal. Because her story clearly matters to you. and because I wish to understand why you think as you do." Marcus leaned his head back against the cold metal wall. "She was from Earth, from a place called Syria. There was a war. This was before humanity made contact with other species. She fled with thousands of other people. She walked for weeks with almost no food. She told me she was so hungry she thought she would die." "But she did not die," Silas said quietly. "No. She made it to a camp, and there were people there, strangers from other countries, who gave out food. Just gave it, no questions asked. She said she cried when they handed her a bowl of rice. It was the first meal she'd had in days." Marcus smiled at the memory. "She never forgot that. She said those strangers saved her life, and she taught me that when you have enough to share, you share, because you never know when someone else might be at the end of their rope." Silas was quiet for a moment. "In Valorian culture, we have no such tradition. Everything is a transaction. You give, you receive. There is always balance, always debt." "Sounds exhausting," Marcus said. "It is, but it is also clear. Everyone knows where they stand." Silas looked down at her hands. "When you gave me that food, I did not know how to process it. A gift with no debt attached, kindness from a stranger who owed me nothing. It was like you were speaking a language I had never learned. And now I think perhaps the Imperium has forgotten many languages we once knew." Silas met his eyes. "We were not always conquerors, Marcus. Long ago, before the Great Expansion, Valorians lived on a single world. We had poets, philosophers, artists. We believed in honor through nobility, not just through strength. What changed? We met other species. Some tried to conquer us. We learned that in this galaxy the strong survive and the weak are destroyed. So we became strong. So strong that we forgot there were other kinds of strength." She paused, until a human reminded me. The ship shuddered as it entered atmosphere. Through the small viewport, Marcus could see the moon called Valdris III, a barren, rocky world with massive canyons and sparse vegetation. When they landed, the outpost commander was waiting. His name was Corvan, and he looked like he'd been carved from stone. Tall even for a Valorian, with scales the color of old bronze, and a scar that ran from his left eye to his jaw. He stared at Marcus with open disgust. "This is the High Command's answer? A human?" Corvan's voice was like grinding rocks. Silas stepped forward. "Commander Corvan, I am. I know who you are, disgraced one. The entire fleet knows your name." Corvan spat to the side. "And now you bring shame to this outpost with your presence and your pet human." Marcus felt his face flush, but he kept his mouth shut. Getting into an argument wouldn't help. Silas's voice went cold. "Show us the situation, Commander. That is why we are here." Corvan grunted and turned away. "Follow me. Try not to die before you see what we face." The outpost was built into a canyon wall, a fortress of metal and stone. 80 soldiers moved through its corridors, all of them looking exhausted and tense. They stared at Marcus as he passed, their expressions ranging from confusion to contempt. Corvan led them to an observation platform overlooking the canyon. "There," he said, pointing. Marcus looked down and felt his stomach drop. The canyon floor was moving. At first he thought it was a trick of the light, but then he realized those were creatures, hundreds of them. They looked like massive reptiles, each one at least 3 meters long, with thick armored hides and jaws full of teeth. They prowled around the base of the outpost, occasionally scratching at the walls or letting out low, rumbling calls. "We call them Scraith," Corvan said. "They appeared 3 weeks ago. At first there were only a few. Now there are more than we can count. They do not stop coming. We can kill them, but for every one we kill, 5 more arrive. They are relentless." Why don't you just evacuate? Marcus asked. Corvan looked at him like he was an idiot. Because we are Valorian soldiers. We do not run from beasts. But Marcus heard something else in his voice. Shame. But you called for evacuation, Silex said quietly. Corvan's jaw tightened. The High Command ordered us to hold this position. But even we have limits. These creatures, they do not fear our weapons. They do not retreat when wounded. They simply keep coming. We estimated that within another week, they would breach our walls through sheer numbers. Marcus studied the creatures below. They did look dangerous, huge, powerful, built for killing. But something was nagging at him. What do they eat? Corvan blinked. What? What do they normally eat? What's their food source? How should I know? They are predators. They eat whatever they can catch. Can I see your files on the local ecosystem? Marcus asked. Corvan stared at him. You want to read about animals while we are under siege? Yes, Marcus said, firmly. I need to understand them. Corvan looked at Sylith. Your human is insane. Let him read, Sylith said. We have 10 days. What harm can it do? Grumbling, Corvan led them to the outpost's data center. Marcus spent the next 6 hours reading everything the Valorians had compiled about Valdris III. Most of it was military data, tactical assessments, defensive positions, weapon effectiveness. But buried in the environmental reports, he found what he was looking for. The ecosystem collapsed, he said, looking up at Sylith. She had been sitting quietly nearby, watching him work. What do you mean? Sylith asked. Marcus pointed to the screen. 6 months ago, there was a major volcanic event on the southern continent. It poisoned a huge section of the ocean, where the Scraith's primary food source lived, schools of fish-like creatures. The Scraith are starving. Sylith leaned forward, reading the report. If they are starving, that makes them more dangerous, not less. Maybe, or maybe it makes them desperate. Marcus stood up, an idea forming in his mind. It was crazy. It was probably impossible. But it was the only thing he could think of. I need to talk to Commander Corvan, he said. They found Corvan in the command center, reviewing defensive positions. He looked up as they entered. Have you finished playing with your data files, human? The Scraith are starving, Marcus said without preamble. Their food source was destroyed by volcanic activity. They're not attacking you out of aggression, they're attacking out of desperation. Corvan shrugged. Starving or not, they want to kill us. The reason does not matter. It matters completely, Marcus insisted. Because you can't fight hunger with guns. You fight it with food. There was a long silence. Then Corvan laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. You want to feed them? Feed the creatures that are trying to kill us. Yes, Marcus said. I want to open your food stores and prepare massive amounts of protein. Then, I want to go outside and leave it for them. You are insane, Corvan said flatly. Maybe, but I'm also right. Look, you said they keep coming, no matter how many you kill. That's because they're desperate. Desperate creatures don't think strategically, they just try to survive. But if you give them what they need, they'll stop attacking. Corvan looked at Sylith. This is your plan? This is how you prove humans are strong? By feeding our enemies? Sylith looked at Marcus. He could see her weighing the odds, calculating the risks. Then she nodded. Yes, this is our plan. It will fail, Corvan said, and when it fails, the human will be killed, probably eaten. Then I'll be eaten, Marcus said, trying to sound braver than he felt. But I don't think I will be. I think those creatures down there just want to survive, same as us. Corvan stared at him for a long moment. Then he sighed. The High Command sent you here to prove something. Very well. I will not stop you from trying. But when the Scraeth tear you apart, do not expect us to retrieve your body." "Fair enough," Marcus said. Over the next day, Marcus worked with the outpost's food synthesizers, creating huge batches of protein-rich paste. The Valorian soldiers watched him with a mixture of amusement and disbelief. Some placed bets on how long he would survive outside the walls. Syleth helped him prepare, not saying much, but staying close. Once, she asked, "Are you afraid?" "Terrified," Marcus admitted. "But my grandmother used to say that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's doing what needs to be done anyway." "Your grandmother was wise." "Yeah," Marcus said softly. She was. When everything was ready, Marcus stood at the outpost's main gate with 50 kilograms of synthesized protein in sealed containers. Corvan and a dozen soldiers watched from the walls above. Syleth stood beside Marcus, her hand on his shoulder. "You do not have to do this alone," she said. "I will go with you." Marcus shook his head. "No. If this goes wrong, at least one of us needs to survive. Besides, this was my idea, my responsibility." "Then may your ancestors watch over you, Marcus Chen." "I don't really believe in ancestors," Marcus said. "But I believe in hungry creatures who just need someone to give them a chance." He stepped through the gate. The canyon floor was rough beneath his boots. The Scraeth had noticed him immediately. A dozen of them turned in his direction, their massive heads lifting, their nostrils flaring. Marcus' hands were shaking so badly he nearly dropped the first container. He set it down 20 meters from the gate and opened it. The smell of protein filled the air. Then he backed away slowly, his heart hammering against his ribs. The nearest Scraeth approached cautiously. It sniffed at the container, then dipped its massive head inside. Marcus heard it eating, loud, wet sounds that should have been terrifying, but somehow weren't. More Scraeth approached. Marcus set down another container, then another, creating a line of food leading away from the outpost. The creatures followed, focusing on the protein instead of him. By the time Marcus made it back to the gate, sweating and shaking, 30 Scraeth were eating from the containers. They weren't attacking, they were just hungry. Corvan was waiting inside. He looked at Marcus with something that might have been respect. That was either very brave or very stupid. "Probably both," Marcus admitted. "We will see if it lasts," Corvan said. "One feeding proves nothing." But Marcus had a feeling it would last, because he'd seen the way those creatures ate, not with aggression, but with desperate relief. He'd given them what they needed, and sometimes that was all it took. The Scraeth came back the next day. Marcus watched from the observation platform as they gathered near where he'd left the food containers. They weren't attacking the walls anymore. They were waiting. "They remember," Syleth said beside him. Marcus nodded. "They're smart enough to learn. That's good." Corvan joined them on the platform. The old commander had barely slept, Marcus could tell. He looked exhausted but also puzzled. "The attacks have stopped. The creatures are just sitting there." "They're waiting to be fed," Marcus said. "Same as we do when we're hungry." "They are predators, not pets," Corvan growled. "They're living things trying to survive," Marcus corrected. "And right now, we're their best chance at survival. So they're choosing to wait instead of attack. That's smart." Marcus spent the morning preparing more protein. The food synthesizers could produce enough to feed the Scraeth indefinitely, as long as the outpost had power. It wasn't a permanent solution. Eventually the ecosystem would need to recover, or the creatures would need to be relocated. But it would work for now. When he carried the containers outside this time, he wasn't as afraid. The Scraeth watched him approach, but they didn't charge. They waited until he set the food down and backed away. Then they ate, making those same rumbling sounds that seemed almost like contentment. One of the younger Scraeth, smaller than the others, maybe not fully grown, approached Marcus directly. It stopped a few meters away and tilted its head, studying him with intelligent eyes. Marcus stayed very still. The creature took another step closer. Marcus could see the details now, the way its scales overlapped, the scars on its hide from fights or accidents, the way its nostrils flared as it scented him. "Easy," Marcus whispered. "I'm just here to help." The Scraeth huffed, a loud sound that made Marcus flinch. But it wasn't aggressive. The creature turned away and went back to the food. When Marcus returned to the outpost, he found Corvan waiting with a dozen soldiers. They all stared at him with expressions Marcus couldn't quite read. "That was—" Corvan paused, searching for words. "That was not what I expected." "What did you expect?" Marcus asked. "I expected you to die," Corvan said bluntly. "I expected the creatures to tear you apart, and for this foolish experiment to end in blood." He looked out at the Scraeth, who were finishing their meal. "Instead, they are eating from your hand like domesticated animals." "They're not domesticated," Marcus said. "They're just not as stupid as we thought. They know a good deal when they see one." Over the next 3 days, Marcus established a routine. Every morning and evening, he went out with food. The Scraeth learned to expect him. They stopped approaching the outpost walls entirely. Some of them even started following Marcus back toward the gate, stopping only when he went inside. The Valorian soldiers watched all of this with growing amazement. Marcus overheard their conversations, skeptical at first, then confused, then something approaching respect. On the 4th day, one of the younger soldiers approached Marcus in the mess hall. His name was Tevin, and he couldn't have been more than 20 in Valorian years. "Human," Tevin said, then corrected himself. "Marcus, may I ask you something?" "Sure," Marcus said, looking up from his meal. "How did you know it would work? Feeding them, I mean. How did you know they would not just kill you and take the food?" Marcus thought about it. "I didn't know for sure, but I've been hungry before. Really hungry. The kind where you'd do almost anything for food. And I remembered what it felt like when someone helped me. So I figured the Scraeth might feel the same way." "But they are animals," Tevin said. "So are we," Marcus pointed out. "We're just animals with bigger brains and better tools. Doesn't mean we don't have the same basic needs. Food, water, safety. The Scraeth needed food. We had food. Seemed like a solvable problem." Tevin sat down across from him. "In Valorian culture, we are taught that strength is the ability to defeat your enemies. You have shown us something different. You defeated the Scraeth without fighting them." "I didn't defeat them," Marcus said. "I just fed them. There's a difference." But Tevin shook his head. "No, Marcus. You solved a problem that 80 trained soldiers could not solve. You did it without weapons, without violence. If that is not strength, then I do not know what is." More soldiers started to approach Marcus over the following days. They asked questions about Earth, about human culture, about his grandmother's story. Marcus answered as best he could, still not quite believing that these warriors, who days ago had looked at him with contempt, were now treating him like an equal. Corvan noticed the change too. On the 6th day, he invited Marcus and Syleth to his private quarters. The room was sparse, decorated only with weapons and a few battle standards. "Sit," Corvan commanded. They sat. The old commander poured 3 glasses of some kind of Valorian drink, thick and green and probably alcoholic. He pushed glasses toward Marcus and Syleth, then raised his own. "To the human who taught soldiers to think like something other than soldiers," Corvan said. He drank. Marcus tried his drink and immediately regretted it. It tasted like metal and burned going down. Corvan watched him cough and actually smiled. "Not to your liking?" "It's different," Marcus managed. "Everything about you is different," Corvan said. He set down his glass. "I have been a soldier for 40 years, Marcus Chen. I have fought in more battles than you have years of life. I have killed enemies, conquered worlds, brought glory to the Imperium, and in all that time, I never once questioned whether what I was doing was right. I did my duty. That was enough. He paused, staring at his empty glass. But watching you these past days, I find myself questioning everything. You came here with no weapons, no training, no military knowledge. You faced a threat that made 80 warriors call for evacuation, and you solved it by feeding them, by showing compassion to creatures that were trying to kill us. Corvan looked up at Marcus. How do I reconcile that? How do I look at my soldiers and tell them that everything we have been taught is wrong? That strength is not just the power to destroy, but also the power to preserve. Marcus didn't know what to say. This grizzled warrior, scarred and weathered by decades of war, was looking at him for answers. It was surreal. Silas spoke instead. You do not have to reconcile it all at once, Commander. You simply have to acknowledge that there may be more than one kind of strength, that the Imperium's way is not the only way. Corvan was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. The High Command will arrive in 4 days to judge the results of this test. When they do, I will tell them what I have seen. I will tell them that a human accomplished what we could not. And I will tell them that perhaps we have been measuring strength by the wrong standards. They might not listen, Silas warned. They might not, Corvan agreed, but I will tell them anyway, because Marcus has shown me that sometimes the hardest thing is not fighting. Sometimes the hardest thing is admitting you are wrong and choosing to be better. The old commander stood and placed his hand over his heart, the Valorian gesture of deep respect. You have my support, both of you. When the High Command judges you, they will also judge me and my soldiers. We will stand with you. Marcus felt something tight in his chest. Gratitude, maybe, or hope. Thank you, Commander. Thank me by surviving, Corvan said gruffly. I would hate for this to be for nothing. The last 3 days passed quickly. Marcus continued feeding the Scraith, and the creatures became almost tame. They recognized him now, made different sounds when he approached. The youngest one, Marcus had started thinking of it as Little One, would often come close enough to almost touch, studying him with curious eyes. The Valorian soldiers started helping with the feeding. At first, just a few. Tevin was the first to actually go outside the walls with Marcus, carrying containers and setting them down, while Scraith waited patiently nearby. Other soldiers followed his example. On the 9th day, Silas found Marcus on the observation platform. He was watching Little One play with some of the other young Scraith, tumbling over each other like puppies. They seem happy, Silas observed. They're not hungry anymore, Marcus said. That probably helps. Silas was quiet for a moment. The High Command arrives tomorrow. Whatever happens, I want you to know you have changed things here. These soldiers will not forget what you have shown them. Will it be enough? Marcus asked. I do not know, Silas admitted, but it is more than we had before. It is hope, and hope is its own kind of strength. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the tribunal chamber, about the high judges and their cold eyes. About what would happen if they decided his success here didn't matter, that Silas's challenge to the Imperium's honor was invalid. He thought about his grandmother, about the strangers who had saved her life with a simple bowl of rice, about how one small act of kindness could ripple outward, changing things in ways you couldn't predict. Tomorrow, he would find out if that was enough. Tomorrow, the Imperium would judge whether compassion was strength or weakness. Tomorrow, everything would change. The High Command's ship arrived at dawn. It was enormous, blocking out the sun as it descended toward the outpost. Marcus watched from the courtyard as Corvan assembled his soldiers in formation, all 80 of them standing at attention in their full armor. Silas stood beside Marcus, calm and composed. She'd barely spoken this morning, but he could see the tension in her shoulders. "Are you ready?" she asked quietly. Marcus laughed, a short, nervous sound. "No, but I don't think that matters anymore." The ship landed in the canyon outside the outpost walls. The Scrath scattered, startled by the noise and the wind from the engines. Marcus worried they might attack, but they just retreated to the canyon's far end, watching warily. The ship's ramp lowered. The three high judges emerged, flanked by an honor guard of elite soldiers. Behind them came a dozen Valorian officials, witnesses to whatever would happen here. The silver-scaled high judge, her name was Kestra, Marcus had learned, surveyed the outpost with sharp eyes. She looked at the assembled soldiers, then at Marcus and Silith, then out at the Scrath lurking in the distance. "Commander Corvin," Kestra said. "Report." Corvin stepped forward. "High Judge, the situation has been resolved. The threat to this outpost has been neutralized without the loss of a single soldier." The black-scaled judge, Dracon, narrowed his eyes. "You said the creatures were too numerous to fight. You called for evacuation. Now you claim victory." "I claim nothing, High Judge. I merely state facts." Corvin's voice was steady. The human Marcus Chen identified the true nature of the threat and implemented a solution that none of my warriors had considered. "Explain," Kestra commanded. Corvin gestured to Marcus. It was his plan. All eyes turned to Marcus. He swallowed hard, his mouth dry. The Scrath weren't attacking out of aggression. They were starving. Their food source was destroyed by volcanic activity 6 months ago. I realized that if we fed them, they would stop attacking, so that's what I did. The red-scaled judge, Sithara, laughed sharply. "You fed them? You fed the enemy?" "They weren't the enemy," Marcus said. "They were just hungry." "And this worked?" Kestra asked, her tone neutral. "Yes, High Judge," Corvin said. "For 9 days, Marcus has been feeding the Scrath. They no longer attack the outpost. They wait peacefully for food, then retreat. Some of my soldiers have even accompanied Marcus outside the walls, without incident." Dracon shook his head. "This proves nothing. The human bribed animals with food. Where is the strength in that?" "The strength," Corvin said, his voice rising, "is that he saw a solution where 80 trained warriors saw only an impossible fight. The strength is that he succeeded where we had failed." "Commander Corvin," Kestra said sharply, "you forget yourself." "No, High Judge," Corvin straightened. "For the first time in my life, I am remembering myself. I am remembering what it means to be Valorian. Not just to fight, but to think. Not just to conquer, but to understand." He turned to face his soldiers. "I have led these warriors for 5 years. I have trained them, fought beside them, bled with them. They are the finest soldiers I have ever known. But in 9 days, this human taught them something I could not teach in 5 years." Corvin looked back at the high judges. He taught them that strength comes in many forms, that sometimes the greatest victory is the one achieved without violence, that compassion and wisdom are not weaknesses to be scorned, but strengths to be cultivated. The courtyard was silent. Even the wind seemed to have stopped. Then Tevin stepped forward from the formation. "High Judge Kestra, I request permission to speak." Kestra looked surprised. "Granted. I am Tevin Vasmorok, Scout Division. I have served the Imperium for 3 years. In that time, I have been taught that Valorian strength is supreme, that other species are inferior, especially humans." He paused. "I believed this completely, until I watched Marcus Chen walk unarmed into a canyon full of predators and turn enemies into allies with nothing but food and courage." Another soldier stepped forward, then another. Within moments, a dozen Valorians had broken formation, all speaking at once, telling the high judges what they had witnessed. Kestra raised her hand for silence. The soldiers quieted immediately, but they didn't return to formation. They stood together, a unified front. "This is highly irregular," Scythara said, her scales flushing darker with anger. "This is Kelshara," Silet said, stepping forward. "I invoked the ancient rite, and it has been answered. These soldiers are proof of what I claimed, that the Imperium has forgotten important truths, that we have measured strength too narrowly. One human feeding animals proves nothing about the Imperium's honor," Dracon growled. "Then let me show you more," Marcus said. He was surprised by his own voice. It came out stronger than he felt. "Let me show you what I've learned about your soldiers these past 9 days." Without waiting for permission, Marcus walked toward the outpost gate. Behind him he heard Sileth call his name, heard Korvan order him to stop. But he kept walking. Marcus stepped outside. The Skraeth were still clustered at the far end of the canyon, agitated by the presence of the High Command's ship. They saw Marcus and stirred, uncertain. He had no food with him this time. He'd left the containers behind, deliberately. Marcus walked forward slowly, his hands visible and empty. "Hey there," he called out. "It's okay. I know you're scared. Big ship, lots of noise. But you're safe." Little One was the first to approach. The young Skraeth moved cautiously, sniffing the air. When it reached Marcus, it made that rumbling sound, almost like a purr. Marcus very slowly, very carefully, reached out his hand. He touched Little One's scales. They were warm, rougher than they looked. Behind him, he heard gasps from the courtyard. He didn't turn around. More Skraeth approached. They surrounded Marcus, not threatening, just curious. The largest one, probably the alpha of the group, came close and studied Marcus with intelligent eyes. Then it lowered its massive head and huffed warm breath across Marcus's face. Marcus stayed still, his heart hammering. This creature could kill him with one bite, but it didn't. It just examined him, then turned and led the other Skraeth back toward their resting area. Marcus walked back to the outpost on shaking legs. When he stepped through the gate, he found the entire courtyard staring at him in stunned silence. Kestra spoke first. "You touched them. They let you touch them." "They're not monsters," Marcus said. "They're just living things trying to survive. Same as us." He placed his fist over his heart. The gesture of ultimate respect in Valorian culture, reserved for the High Command and the Imperial throne. "What are you doing, Commander?" Dracon demanded. "I am showing respect to someone who has earned it," Korvan said. "This human accomplished what I could not. He turned a hopeless situation into a peaceful resolution. He taught my soldiers to think differently, to see strength where we saw only weakness." Tevin knelt beside Korvan, then another soldier, then another. Within moments, all 80 soldiers were kneeling in the courtyard, not to the high judges, but to Marcus. The silence that followed was profound. Marcus stood there, overwhelmed, not knowing what to do or say. These warriors, who had looked at him with contempt just days ago, were now kneeling before him. Sithara looked furious. "This is outrageous." To an outsider, but Kestra was staring at the kneeling soldiers with an expression Marcus couldn't read. Slowly, she turned to Sileth. "You invoked Kelshara. You claimed the Imperium has lost its honor. These soldiers seem to agree with you." "We do, High Judge," Korvan said, still kneeling. "Marcus Chen showed us that strength is not just the power to destroy. It is also the power to preserve, to understand, to show mercy. If this is weakness in the Imperium's eyes, then we worship the wrong gods." Kestra looked at Dracon and Sithara. Some silent communication passed between them. Then, moving slowly, deliberately, Kestra removed her helmet. She descended the ramp of her ship, and walked across the courtyard. She stopped in front of Marcus, studying him with ancient eyes. "You are a cargo hauler," she said. "No military training, no weapons, no power except what you carry in here. Yet you succeeded where our warriors were ready to fail. You turned enemies into allies. You showed compassion where we showed only force. She looked at Sylith. Your challenge is answered, Commander Sylith Voskorum. Kelshara is satisfied. Then Kestra did something Marcus never expected. She knelt. The red-scaled and black-scaled judges stared in shock. Kestra, Scythara gasped. You cannot. I can and I am, Kestra said firmly. I am not kneeling to this individual human. I am kneeling to the principle he represents. I am acknowledging that the Imperium has been wrong, that we have measured strength too narrowly, and in doing so, we have lost something precious. She looked up at Marcus. You gave Commander Sylith your last meal, when you had every reason to let her starve. You risked your life to save creatures that were trying to kill you. You showed these soldiers a better way, without asking for anything in return. If that is not honor, then I do not know what honor is. Kestra stood and addressed the assembled crowd. Let it be known that Kelshara has been invoked and answered. Commander Sylith Voskorum is restored to her rank, with full honors. And a new division will be created within the Valorian military. A diplomatic corps, dedicated to finding strength through understanding rather than conquest. She turned to Sylith. You will lead this new division, Commander, and you will have the support of the High Command. Sylith looked stunned. High Judge, thank you. Do not thank me. Thank your human friend. Kestra looked at Marcus. We have one more matter to address. Marcus Chen, the Imperium owes you a debt. Name your price. Marcus thought about his broken ship in Bay 17 of Crossroads Station. He thought about being hungry, about having nothing. Then he thought about his grandmother's words. When you have enough to share, you share. I want a food-sharing protocol, Marcus said. On every Valorian ship and station, make sure that no one of any species goes hungry, while others have plenty. Make it law. Kestra smiled, a genuine smile. A small request with enormous implications. Granted. Is there nothing else? No wealth? No ship, no title? Fix my cargo hauler's engine, Marcus said, and maybe some back pay for the days I've been here. Kestra actually laughed. Done. You are a strange creature, Marcus Chen, but perhaps that is what the Imperium needs. More strangeness, less certainty. The black-scaled Judge Dracon stepped forward reluctantly. I still believe strength is measured in battle, but I cannot deny what I have seen here. He looked at Marcus. You have my respect, human, even if I do not fully understand you. Scythara was the last to speak. She looked unhappy, but resigned. The vote is 3-0. Kelshara is answered. The Imperium will change. She paused. I hope you are right about this, Kestra. I hope we are not weakening ourselves. We are not, Kestra said firmly. We are becoming stronger. We are learning that there is more than one kind of strength. That evening, there was a feast in the outpost. The Valorian soldiers prepared food from a dozen different traditions, and for the first time in the Imperium's history, humans and Valorians ate together as equals. Marcus sat with Sylith, Corvin, and Tevin. Outside the walls, the Skraeth were resting peacefully, their bellies full. What will you do now? Sylith asked Marcus. Go back to hauling cargo, I guess, Marcus said. It's what I'm good at. You could stay with the diplomatic corps, Sylith suggested. We will need advisors who understand other species, who understand that strength comes from compassion. Marcus thought about it. But first, I want to go home. See Earth again. Tell my family about the time I accidentally started a diplomatic revolution. Corvin raised his glass. To Marcus Chen, the human who conquered an empire with a single meal. I didn't conquer anything, Marcus protested. No, Sylith said softly. You did something better. You changed hearts, and that is far more powerful than any conquest. They drank together, human and Valorian, former enemies, now friends. And outside, under the stars of an alien world, the Skraeth slept peacefully, no longer hungry, no longer afraid. Marcus thought about his grandmother, about the strangers who had saved her with a bowl of rice, about how one act of kindness could ripple outward, changing the universe in ways you couldn't predict. He'd given his last meal to a stranger, and in return, he'd helped change an empire. Not bad for a cargo hauler from Earth.